9 podcasts.
T-minus 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Freddie,
Russ.
I want to dive straight into advertising. How's that?
Yeah, sick.
Well, I actually listened to last week's podcast. I thought, Russell, I mean, honestly, what are you doing talking about town squares in Melbourne? There's got nothing to do with advertising, right? So I think we should over-index today. I want to show you something, a commercial which I think I sent it around. I hope you haven't seen it yet. Let's just have a quick look, if we may, Jen.
Yo, R-I-C-E. Let's cook it. Rice, baby. All right, stop. Grab a plate and listen. Rice is back with a whole new dimension. Sunrise, baby. Rice bowl, baby. Me, I'm making stir-fry magic. Taste buds gonna be ecstatic. Rice sides, baby. Sunrise, baby.
Right. So, Freddie, what do you think I want to say about that?
I think you're a big fan. I think you might have been hugely excited to see this.
What I want to say is that's how easy it is. Yeah. I tell you, with respect, Freddie, you don't need a lot of planning documents to get to that point, right?
Yeah, very few PowerPoints.
There's no PowerPoints involved. That is just literally the thing. The interesting thing that they've done there is that they've been creative with their budget, is what I would suggest. So, and I love the fact that, so let's just say for argument's sake that they've got $100,000, right? So I'm not imagining that the rice people, Sunrise people, are going to be happy to spend $1 million on an ad, nor can I imagine them wanting to spend $500,000 on an ad, right? So there'll just be numbers that they just, their eyes would water, they just sort of, everything would glaze over if the ad guy said, I'd need $500,000, right? So they have said, this is all assumption, right? I don't know whether what I'm saying is accurate. I feel like it might be, though. So they've said, we've got $100,000. And the agency responsible have said, okay, we've got $100,000. What we're going to do is we're going to spend 80 on music. Yeah, and we'll spend 20 on what is basically a slideshow of people enjoying eating rice. Right? So this, yeah, it's something of an old-fashioned way to crack a problem. They actually are running it on the television, so this isn't something where okay, we'll make a 30-second commercial, vanilla ice baby, and what we'll then do is we'll stick it on YouTube, and whenever anyone's sort of searching for food inspiration, we hit them with this, which they may well be doing. But I've seen it on the television, and I've seen it quite a few times, and that to me is also exciting, right? In that they obviously rice is ubiquitous, right? Clearly they have found a way to actually brand rice with their Sunrise baby, and they've spent what it looks like to me the lion's share of the production budget on their soundtrack. Yeah, what do you reckon?
I'm a big fan of it. It's funny you say that's how easy it is. Maybe a revised statement should be that's how easy we should make it.
Yes.
There's a lot of pressure, I feel, sometimes when you are rocking up to a presentation. And maybe this is, as I'm only feeling this as a strategist, I'm sure creatives already understand this very much so, but walking into a client presentation, they have nerves. And sometimes your job is to make everyone a little less scared. And that naturally leads to more PowerPoints, more data points, and it's easy to sort of, you can see how it all gets very complicated from there. Do you have any, I guess, advice walking into, these presentations and these clients who, have spent money and so they want to be impressed? How do you suggest navigating this tension going in there being like, yeah, thanks for that check you sent. It's actually a lot easier than any of us think it is. It's rice, baby.
Just rice, baby. I mean, it probably starts at the beginning, at the very, very beginning. It almost starts at a advertising agency culture, leadership culture, recognizing that, well, if you want to have a ad culture, which is, as in an agency culture, which is, let's not overcomplicate, let's make things simple, and let's do our very best to create advertising which is, ubiquitous. And you sort of go into the relationship that you have with a client with that as a philosophy. I think you've probably got to start. You've got to start with the end in mind, as they say. So what sort of agency do we want to be? And what, of course, has happened over probably 30 years is certainly 30 years ago, the agency that had the biggest impact on me, it only ever presented one idea. So we would turn up and we'd say, we've cracked it and here it is. And that agency did not have a planning department. Right? It refused to have one, and we're talking about a very big and sophisticated agency, right? It wasn't just, it wasn't in a garage, it was the real deal. And the real deal, what they felt was going on was the emancipation of the account guy, and an over complex approach to what should be simple. Now, of course, being brilliant isn't simple, but actually, I suppose, recognising that a simple process might get you to a simple spot. I'll give you another example of that agency. Yes, it had a creative brief, but it was a blank page. Right, so there were no boxes that you had to fill in. So I don't know whether that's happening at BBDO, whether you've got boxes that you've got to fill in. I think most agencies try and, they try and put boxes around the magic, don't they? So and overcomplicate things. And I'm not saying you don't need planning departments. I'm not saying you don't need research. I'm not saying that you don't need all those structures. But I sort of half am saying, let's get excited about the simplicity of something like Rice Baby.
I'm all with you. I'm 100%. I feel like when I'm doing my job best, it's defending simplicity.
Yeah,
it's saying too many words. We don't need that. It's one of the great lines in the Amadeus, the film on Mozart. Yep.
When the king, the Austrian king, when he says too many notes, right? I don't know whether you've seen that. It's just fucking magnificent. So good.
And of course, he's meant to be he's cast as sort of the idiot in that.
Yeah,
you're probably watching him saying, "No, King Louis, you're a smart bloke.
You nailed it, brother." Right? And then I thought, I wonder whether Freddie remembers Sakata.
Sakata, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably, when I would look at that Rice Baby, it just reminds me of Sakata, Sakata.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to Cicada? I mean, as in, they were a massive advertiser. They launched their brand, and what do they do now? Just sort of, exploit price, I assume. And you know what? All they need to do is just every now and then just give us a bit of Sakata, right? They don't have to advertise a lot. What do you call it? The residual value of advertising. So the residual value of Sakata is, how do you put a number around the residual value of just that, Sakata. And again, the visual, nothing, right? It was nothing. It was a bouncing
It was
biscuit.
just the cracker over like a karaoke sort of thing, just like the cracker bouncing over the name Sakata. It was
exactly
instructing you how to pronounce it whilst it was worming its way into your brain. It's funny, whenever I get a job that's like helping to name a business, it's very hard to convince people of this because they feel their business is very important and they want to work at somewhere that's respected. It's very hard to get across to them the importance of having a name that's fun to say, that you can almost sing. It's the power and the money-making potential in having something that's fun to say is just
precisely.
It's huge.
And maybe there's a bit of PTSD around this Cicada and Rice Baby, because I pitched for Cicada and didn't win. It's one of the great factory tours of my life. I used to love doing factory tours, So Cicada's an opportunity. Oh, I'd love to come and have a look at your factory. And that's when I realised that what we were confronted with at Cicada was a money-making machine. I mean, seriously, what do you need? Rice, water, and an oven, and then stick these things in a plastic container. And then, we lost the business. And then, some months later, I didn't win the pitch, I should say. And then some months later, you see the Cicada solution, which, of course, I have no doubt we turned up with 50 PowerPoint slides, because we wanted to show them our genius. And we wanted to show them, the gap in the market. And we had, our x-axis and our y-axis, and we had our, BCG analysis and whatever the hell, right? No, just give me a rice, baby, right? So, let's find opportunities for more rice, babies, I reckon.
Wonderful. Well, you'd probably be pretty tickled by this report then that was released, I think, last week or the week before, coming out of the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, a very famous organisation out of South Australia. And they released a report on brand purpose, asking the question, do consumers actually know or care? So as a primer for our listeners, brand purpose is the stated reason that your brand exists. So while you might think it's, in most cases, it's to provide customers with your product or your service, I feel like it became fashionable over the past however many years to elevate and then advertise that purpose. So Nike's brand purpose is to promote diversity and inclusion in sport. Tony's Chocolonely, they campaign for a slave-free chocolate industry. And
oh, wow, okay. Yep.
Yeah, the findings of the report is that awareness of brand purpose is surprisingly low. So only around 18% on average across the US, UK and Australia. And they believe that may be inflated by guessing, suggesting that true awareness is closer to something like 10%. And that's even for brands that are seen as, quote, purpose leaders. So the report argues that, in these cases, like Nike, which is an outlier, 52% of people in the US are aware of their purpose. But that's more about just how huge the brand is, as opposed to, the power of its purpose and its cut through. So the report's arguing that purpose really rarely drives behaviour and that marketers should be cautious about over-investing in it as a strategy. So my theory, Russ, is that purpose hasn't always been around and that you might have actually been around when it started to sort of first work its way into conversations. So, when was that? And do you still see it around?
So Dove, I would argue, I'm imagining that Dove was the reason why purpose became, the headline act. And Dove made a beautiful campaign, which was all around, beauty in all shapes and sizes, and it was incredibly successful. And of course, it won at Cannes. And then what happens, Freddie, is that people try and uncover, okay, so why did this happen? And what we do in advertising is we always tell everyone our secrets, right? So you've cracked a reason why you managed to do brilliant advertising for Dove, and it was all about brand purpose, And then everyone says, oh, okay, well, I need a brand purpose for my chocolate bar. I need a brand purpose for my shoe polish. I need brand purpose for my tea. I need brand purpose for my bank. I need brand purpose, right? And so all of a sudden, brand purpose became the platform upon which you would leap off into the creative unknown and deliver something that gets you to the south of France in June, right? that is what happened. And I remember it distinctly because I was saying to my colleagues, this is trousers. Right? I just was, I could see I knew what was going on. What was going on was a way to seduce the client and unlock, a new way to communicate. So it was more about the advertising that it would create rather than whether it was the need for the brand, the product, the service. That was always my view. I mean, I was surprised when he said that 18% of the consumers have got a clue about purpose. I think that's horribly inflated. It would be not even half that. And your purpose, tea manufacturer, is to sell tea. That's it. Yeah, and so there was always a dishonesty to it. It doesn't mean that, okay, if you're a chocolate manufacturer and you are in fact purchasing raw product from people that are into slave trade, right? So it doesn't mean that you don't attack that problem, but the very idea that you turn that purpose into something that you then advertise, I think is, well, I've never liked it, and I'm thrilled that Byron Sharp at Ehrenberg Bass also has said it. Well, has he said it's nonsense, or he's just given us research with regard to you might think that this is important, but it's actually not?
I think it's more on the latter, and then he does, or they provide pretty tantalising arguments in the fact that if you think this is a growth lever, then it's probably not. It's okay for your brand to have a purpose, but you are probably better off just donating to that cause, and whatever advertising money you are going to spend talking about your purpose, put that toward more effective growth strategies so that you can donate more money to the cause.
Well, and I think that, I certainly would endorse that as a notion. No doubt about it. I mean, do you advertise the fact that you are into the reduction of slave trade in the manufacturing of, cocoa products? Do you actually advertise that? I'm not sure. What do you think?
It's tough. I think you can. I'm reluctant here to give any sort of black and white hard, because as you've pointed out, Dove, that was an incredibly successful ad. So I think the harshest we can be here, or the clearest, the most definitive, is to say that it may not be necessary, especially less so in advertising. I do, though, think sometimes about, we see a lot of mission statements and vision statements when you're in the brand strategy side of things, and maybe it has some value internally, sort of at an organizational sort of psychology level here.
With you.
So getting people excited to be there and to feel like, actually, no, I like where I work because we do good things, and I may not be passionate about whatever it is, like accounting services, but, we're putting shoes on children in some, far off land. Like that might be a reason to maintain or keep it.
Well, Freddie, I think you've absolutely nailed it. Yeah, no question that, core purpose around the corporation, the business that you work for, I do think there is definitely a role in that. For starters, you can get people lined up, lined up behind a core idea, right? So, and then as a result, you can have internal behaviour that reflects the fact that you want to, in a Nike sense, what's our core purpose? Well, we want to make sure that everyone leads an athletic life, whatever, right? So that to me lines everyone up internally, and that definitely works. It may then bleed out from internal to in to out. It might. It's quite interesting. I'm just thinking that through. So the sort of the idea of a lighthouse strategy is something which I have always liked. Core purpose, imagine that core purpose is the business, and therefore the picture in your mind is a lighthouse, and then you beam the light out, right? And some people catch the light and they're attracted by the light. I've always liked that as an idea, and I can see it working. Maybe where I have a problem is when you you create a purpose where, the ad people who are a supplier to the client, they sort of create the purpose in order to create the advertising. Maybe that's the bit where I get a little bit anxious. Maybe, yeah. I'm sort of thinking this through because I have been involved in meetings where I've been very passionate about purpose with regard to a corporate and getting people lined up behind a corporate purpose. I've definitely done that. So I'm trying to not be duplicitous here by saying I think all purpose is trousers. So so maybe I'm trying to find the grey area.
It's a tough one, and I do agree. I think we are all to some extent guilty of aggrandizing what we do sometimes as a means to better understand what it is, whether it's motivation internally, or if it is sort of just trying to start with how on earth can we talk about crackers in an interesting way. Well, then we elevate it. We ramp up the stakes. We make this about world hunger. It's not about cheese and crackers. It's about, so I am guilty of that. And I don't think this is the last time I'll ever suggest, should we make this a little more dramatic? I think I am probably going to suggest it at some time in the future as well. But important, I guess, to caveat and when I do that, hey, maybe this isn't sort of the most mathematically sound way to go about it.
Or am I having this conversation and am I putting that slide up on the screen because I know this is going to make better advertising, right? Or am I doing it because I know I'm going to sell more? I think ultimately sometimes those two things can be, working in parallel, not in unison. Whenever you say Byron Sharp, I think of a few things, if I may. So the first thing to think about with Byron Sharp is, yes, he is in South Australia, where Ehrenberg Bass is. He's more famous in the Northern Hemisphere than the Southern Hemisphere. Like, he is unbelievably powerful in the Northern Hemisphere brand market. Incredible. The other thing I think about is 60-40. He's been talking about that forever, right? 60% brand, 40% tactical. The other thing I love about Byron is he always gets asked about budget. How much money should I spend? And his answer is always the same: as much as you possibly can. And then he then gets asked, so when should I spend it? And he said, well, just get as much as you possibly can and divide it by 12 and spend that much every single month, right? So he's into the idea of relentless consistency, right? Yeah, good. And he also talks about loyalty, the old 80-20 rule. 80% of, 20% of my audience give me 80% of the money. And therefore what happens is we sort of build loyalty programs. He goes, not so sure about that. Just spend the money getting an extra sale. And that extra sale, so the 3 cans of Coke that I might buy a week, turn that into 4, multiply that by the population of the world, right? And that's the extra sale is the critical thing here, and the new user being the best extra sale. And then, because what do? You then turn the new user into a more regular user. So I like the simplicity. And then, of course, what he's done is he's put robust research around these sort of simple ideas. Huge fan. Love him.
It's, big fan. I hope his legacy is remembered for his impact, because it is almost obvious in a way that growth comes from getting new customers. I hope people in the future understand just how hard that had to be fought for in business circles.
Well, I think what he's certainly done from the old guy in the room's point of view is he put some robust numbers and research around what you sort of knew to be true, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then along came a more sophisticated client in that they were looking to really understand where every dollar was going and the return that every dollar was giving. And of course, part of the difficulty in what you do, Freddie, is that a lot of it is just long-term effects, right? And long-term effects can be hard to measure. The CFO says, well, I need to know that dollar's working. And you say, well, look, it's hard for me to tell you how that dollar's working, but it will work in the long term, right? Well, sorry, mate, I've got a quarterly review with the market and I need to know and they need to know how I'm performing. So forget about that long-term dollar, just give me short-term returns. So the pressure has been really profound over 30 years. And so good on Byron for trying to sort of, provide the evidence that all of us in the ad world need. We need the evidence of Ehrenberg Bass. And Mutinex. Let's not forget Mutinex.
Let's not forget Mutinex. So I wanted to talk to you about Anthropic, the AI company, and their first brand campaign for their tool Claude. The name of the campaign is Keep Thinking. We'll take a look in just a sec. It's got music and we'll hear the voiceover, and underneath we'll see visuals of people sort of tinkering with hardware, taking notes and being out in nature. But let's take a look.
There's never been a worse time. Problem. 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 There's never been a worse time. There's never been a worse time. There's never been a better time. A better time to have a problem. To be stuck. To be overwhelmed. To be impatient. To be out of ideas or out of your depth. Out of breath. There's never been a better time to have a medical condition. Just look at the research being done. To have no qualifications, no resources. To not understand, feel insignificant. To feel restless. Right now there really has never been a better time.
Yeah.
So what do you think? There's never been a worse time to there's never been a better time to have a problem. Claude, AI for problem solvers. Keep thinking. Russ, what do you think?
Well, it's outstanding, right? It's absolutely beautiful. And again, back to the simplicity theme, right? So, are you a glass half empty or a glass half full sort of person? I mean, and ultimately, so as AI, takes over, there's plenty of discussion around the negativity of AI. And yet what they've done in this advertising, of course, is talk about the upside and the positive message, which I adore. I think it is beautiful. And the other thing which I think you have to applaud, if that's the right word, the agency and the client, is it would have been tempting, and I can see a script. So let's call that a 60-second commercial. I know it's a bit longer than that, but let's call it 60. It would have been tempting to write for 50 seconds the problem, right? We've got a problem here, we've got a problem, and then solve it with Claude, right? So no, that's not a problem because of Claude and AI. You can see, in my mind's eye, I can see a script, which would have been the front third of that commercial we've just seen actually is at least 2/3 of the commercial, yeah? So that's another reason why I love it, in that they have decided to, yes, point out to all of us that there is a negative conversation occurring around AI, but then just smash us with all the great things that are going on. And I buy it, and I totally buy it. I actually haven't had a look at Claude, and now I need to have a look at Claude.
It follows from what they've so Anthropic and Claude, they're sort of the inventors of vibe coding. So it makes sense that they give us a very vibey spot. And I feel like Anthropic with this spot, they might have learned from the mistakes of like big tech's AI communications that we've seen in the past. So if you remember Apple's AI spots from last year, where you saw people at the office writing like pretty uninspiring, poorly worded emails, and then Apple Intelligence fixes it, or a wife forgets that it's her husband's birthday, so she tells Siri to put together a sentimental carousel, or even Apple. A journalist from Axios pointed out, reminded me of the Apple spot where you see all the tools and instruments getting crushed on that platform into the iPad. And even thinking about OpenAI's like Super Bowl spot, where it's about the intelligence age, and they were talking about like, this is like the moment, everything's going to change. Although that didn't cause, I guess, like any ruckus or pushback on that, it now, in light of this spot, strikes me as the wrong strategy. Instead of like getting people almost scared by saying like, now something's about to happen, they're saying, no, it's happening now. There are some problems, and you are going to be the one to solve it, and you should be excited about solving it because we're by your side. It's a really deft strategy.
Well, imagine in 100 years, 200 years, the era that we're entering into right now, it may well be known as the Second Renaissance. Who's to say it's not going to be known as a Second Renaissance because of all the creativity that's going to be unlocked and all the brand new, interesting, creative inventions, etc. That is going to be. I mean, that ad is. I think when I look at that commercial, I'm thinking, oh yeah, we are about to hit a renaissance. And the other theme that we've had, the 21st century's only just begun. So that to me, that sort of goes into that narrative as well, which as you would imagine excites me. The other thing which I think's interesting is AIs. They all seem to be branding themselves with a name, don't they? So, as in Claude. I believe there's a legal AI now that's been launched called Harvey. So is that's the trope, if that's the right word, and whether that is a fail if you're doing that. So everyone's going to compete with like Watson and Claude and Harvey. I don't know. Although it's not entirely true, is it? So, I don't know. Anyway, do you like the commercial, Freddie?
I love the commercial. I think I found it very interesting and really smart how much hardware they showed in the spot as well. So we see people plugging things in, sketching out, building tools, being out in nature, sort of climbing mountains with mathematical overlays in there. I think it's the the feeling and the message being here that this isn't going to take anything away from you, that you'll actually get to live a very tactical, inventive, generative life with this at your side is a really smart thing for them to do. It positions them not as like, oh, we're going to consume everything, but quite the opposite. We are going to be the platform with which you build things in the physical world. And that's really exciting and calming. And it took seeing this for me to realize that was a concern of mine, that it was all just going to be digital and everything was going to be screens. But to have a tactile future, I now realize is something that I want. I think they've done a really good job. And I think this sort of advertising, in a way, it's trust building. Dare I say, it might even be related to purpose. And I think it's necessary at this time. So I'm thinking about Meta this past week. They had their product demo where they were talking about their new Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and the reviews are actually surprisingly good. People are saying, okay, this is looking like it's going to happen. They're going to make this, and it's going to work. But looking online at like Reddit and other sort of online forums, people are remaining skeptical of the company itself. And so we're seeing that distrust of a company and their intentions for us in the future may be an impediment to adoption. So I think Anthropic is smart to identify that trust building needs to be a part of their comms.
Have I ever told you about the notion of a data union? I don't know whether I ever told you about that.
Yeah. I love that. I love that one.
Yeah, and I wonder whether that will actually arrive. So if we go back, the first industrial revolution, what did the man do? Well, the man exploited the proletariat, right? And in order to try and get some balance, unions were created in order to balance capital labour. What's happening now? All of us are being exploited. Each of us individually, our data is being exploited for someone else's gain, not our personal gain. So I have often wondered, is there a opportunity, or will it happen, data unions where you actually gang up against, tech? So tech is exploiting you and me because of the fact that they've got all of our data. They know exactly how you and I behave. They exploit it for their own commercial gain. So surely we should get a share of that, right? So, I mean, good luck. Yeah, good luck creating that union. I don't know how you'd even, it's a nice thought bubble, right? But actually doing it, I think maybe a little harder. I had a name for it too. So have you ever, it's called the Hijinks Union. And the only reason why it's called
Hijinks Union.
yeah, Hijinks. So if you put hijinks in lowercase in your mind's eye, you've got an I with a dot above it, you've got a J with a dot above it, and you've got an I with a dot above it. So you've got the three dots. And of course, what happens in the world of search, you get those three dots. What are those three dots called? As you know, when you look at your WhatsApp and you see that I'm typing, you'll have three dots dancing. Those three dots dancing. Has it got a name?
Sort of like a digital ellipses or something.
Yeah, right. And so I could just see, the three dots of Hijinks, which is the name of our union. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so in AI news, I did check whether this was true, and my AI machine told me yes, it is true. Albania has appointed a AI minister, and what I mean by that it's not an individual who is the ministry in charge of AI, and I imagine what are we going to do? How do we use AI? No. The minister is AI. Have you seen this?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Albania has a minister that is AI. And here's the good news. The minister that's AI is in charge of procurement. So why would you have a procurement AI minister? Well, to ensure that procurement of government services is incorruptible. Now, well, I like it, right? That's cool. The only thing I can see getting in the way of that is that, when people they do search engine optimization. So they work out what they need to do with their digital footprint in order to ensure that when I'm searching that they get to the top, right? So you game the machine. So I wonder if I'm selling services, government services, to the minister, the AI minister of Albania, whether I'll work out how to game the machine, right?
It's definitely possible. And Aliva, this job that you're talking about, sort of AI optimization, is is a thing. It's growing. It's in its infancy, of course, but it is becoming. I think it might be a little naive to believe that just because AI is doing it and no one really knows how it works, then it is thus uncorruptible. But I do.
I know.
I do sort of like. I can see how Albania might be like. Maybe it's preferable to whatever's going on at the moment that we have. So yeah, I'm nervous about us sort of relegating government and all sort of processes to some black box and no one really knows how it works. But a cool idea.
It's a really cool idea. And you know what? Obviously, ministers will be using procurement departments will be using AI, I'm sure. I mean, have you, for example, dropped a legal document into AI and asked it to give you a point of view?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, right. And pretty. I mean, so what do? You actually read the point of view from the AI, and then you assume that what the AI has told you is right.
Yes, you do, and you trust it more because it feels like, I don't know, maybe this is too paranoid of me, but with a lot of legalese and similar, department stuff, that it's written in such a way as to purposefully confuse and to put them on a pedestal because they're trying to get you in subclause A.3b or something like that.
It does feel like that, doesn't it?
It does, and when you can just feed it into a machine and say, "All right, am I getting screwed here?" and they go, "Yeah, you are."
Yeah, you are. list all the ways that I'm getting screwed. Oh my goodness me! What else? We got anything else?
Yeah, we've got. I wanted to talk to you about. It's a few weeks old now, but Telstra's intergalactic cybersecurity campaign. So I wanted to talk to you about this. Cybercrime is a real national issue in Australia. Australians lose thousands of dollars every minute to scams, and so Telstra is taking this opportunity to talk about not just their coverage but their safety credentials. And instead of a dry cybersecurity message, Telstra has gone big. Maybe a little silly and sci-fi, and they've cast Steve Buscemi as an evil intergalactic emperor whose minions try to scam planet Earth. Let's take a look.
It's the Dream Team. Okay, Armatron. Pull that deceiver lever. Show them what you got. Come on. Blocked by Telstra. Oh, what a surprise. I don't even know what that is.
Righto, tell me everything, Freddie.
I love this, and reading about it and the team and how they came up with this. What I particularly enjoy is that internally everyone was talking about this ad like it was a product demo. That we would like to demonstrate Telstra's cybersecurity in action, and then they've given that to the team and they've said, all right, the most interesting way we can do this is we go to space and we get aliens, which is a great sort of workaround when you think about sort of their brand tone and how positive and how light and how sort of communal they've been, how Telstra continues in that sort of feeling whilst talking about a very real issue. And they've gone to comedy and they've gone to casting as the villains in the story, Steve Buscemi as a big-brained alien. I love that part of it. And of course, as we've come to expect from Telstra and Bear Meets Eagle on Fire, their agency, the craft, the set design, all the atmosphere, the little beeping and booping, the different kinds of aliens. We've seen there, some little green alien with a giant mechanic arm pulling the deceiver lever. It's joyful, and we know that, it's almost a funny foil, I guess, for Anthropic and what they've done there, where, here's a threat, and we'd like to position ourselves as a potential solution to that threat. It's funny how they've gone down a comedic route, and I wonder, what do you think is as an alleyway to go through comedy when talking about a serious issue? Do you think that's the right tone to be striking, or are they risking trivializing the threat here? What do you think?
Well, what I think is that they're very brave, and the consumer, the public, will reward them for doing that. And this, of course, is about the leadership. We've spoken to the man, Brent, in that he understands maybe as good as anyone. He understands that every single brief is its own opportunity. So every product, every service, every brief is a chance to, build the connection that the public has with, in this case, with Telstra. And I suppose, what does that do? That reminds me of that wonderful definition of brand being a bird's nest. And, this beautiful thing called the Telstra bird's nest, and every single twig and spit and mud and poo is actually, a part of building something just glorious. And they're on their way, aren't they, to building something even more powerful. This Telstra thing, it's great. It's great watching it, isn't it? And of course, let's get excited, Freddie, because when that commercial launched probably 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, my reaction to it was, well, hang on, that's a bit early. The reason why I thought that was we've got the grand final this weekend.
That's right.
Yeah,
yes.
Right? So I thought, okay. So that struck me as, grand final worthy advertising. Yeah. So let's get excited. There may well be something else coming, something even bigger, even more beautiful, even better. I mean, really, is that possible? Well, yeah, it is possible. For starters, you've got Telstra Money, and that does need to be acknowledged. They are in a position to, if they want to spend, a couple of mil making an ad, they can. So that is a huge advantage that they've got. What is also advantageous because of the money is you can do a lot of content. And again, as in ads, you can do a lot of ads. And they are doing that as well. And look, frankly, as someone that just is happier to watch the ads than to watch the show, I'm thrilled with the entertainment that they're giving me as well. Like the ad, like the brand by the brand, it's a very simple equation. Going back to the agency that I worked at many years ago at the start of the conversation, where the brief was a blank piece of paper, and they tried to simplify it. They had a very simple point of view. It was like the ad, like the brand by the brand, right? And you can show evidence that that's true. You really can. Make likable advertising. Likable advertising does create a sales effect. And yet we've complicated things, Freddie.
We have. Could I talk about I think it's that idea of likability. You're making me realise that that final image we get where it's the Telstra logo over the view of Australia from space with the line "Wherever we go," positioning. Just that final thing, it feels sort of like, there's a blanket of security over Australia. Like it's a masterful sort of thing to feel like thankful to Telstra because they're protecting our country from, alien threats there. Like the analogy, you can see what they're sort of hinting at, but they're doing it in a very fun and playful way that makes me, and you said it best, it makes me like them.
Yeah,
which
beautifully.
It's just amazing.
Right. And so 5 years ago, did we like Telstra? No, we didn't put Telstra in the likable bucket. And right now, Optus has got you may or may not have seen the news with Optus, right? So yeah, you have seen the news with Optus, which is just terrible for all concerned. And I would Optus now be saying, gee whiz, we haven't invested a lot in our likable bucket. Now, you can't really, I don't really want to say that if they invested money in advertising, then the disaster that they're confronted now wouldn't be as disastrous, because it's a disaster, right? So you can't sort of, you can't ad wash the disaster that has befallen Optus and those individuals. Though there is an interesting case study in, let's say, 6 months' time around the role that advertising plays in the goodwill bucket. And if you think about a goodwill bucket so let's have a bucket of water, right? And if the bucket of water, if it's full, and then water's going to spill, right? There's going to be things that happen which means that the goodwill bucket's going to empty. But you need to make sure you've got a full bucket, right? If the goodwill bucket's low on water, and then you have a disaster and all the water's poured out, then you're empty. I'm not so sure that's good. That's not good corporate management. And one of the things which did happen Freddie, I reckon 1987. When there was a crash in 87? There was a decline in the wealth of advertising agencies, advertisers. They started cutting back on their budgets. One of the things that they cut back was corporate advertising. If you go back into the early 80s, corporates advertised heavily. And you just have a big brand piece around corporate X, right? And they stopped it. And they stopped it, when they were looking for savings on their expense line. And they may not be smart. Freddie, anything else? Has anyone sent us a message? Has any of the listeners? Have we got any listeners?
Is anyone out there? No requests this week, but that's an excellent opportunity for anyone listening. If you want to find us at Admission Podcast on Instagram, ask us a question, share with us an ad you'd like us to discuss. We'd love to hear from you.
Good on you, Freddie.
Thanks, Raz.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to Admission wherever you get your podcasts.
And follow us on Instagram at Admission Podcast. You can send us a message, an ad, an idea, anything you reckon we should talk about.
You can also follow me, Russell Howcroft, on X or LinkedIn. And of course, you can hear me on 3AW Breakfast every morning with the inimitable Ross Stevenson. Chat to you next week, Freddie.
See you, Raz.